Help your family, or stay out, Dad barked after I told him I wasn't covering his debts this time. I didn't argue. I picked the second option because honestly, I was done playing the family ATM. 3 days later, I got a call from a lawyer. I remember just standing there, staring down at my phone like it might bite me, reading Dad's last message over and over. Help your family, or stay out. That was all he wrote. No context, no attempt at a real conversation, just one final demand wrapped in a threat. And for the first time ever, I made the call I should have made a long time ago. I chose me. I clicked the phone screen off and let it fall onto the couch. The quiet in my tiny apartment hit different, eerie, like something was missing. Thing is, I'd spent my whole life cleaning up after my father's disasters. One financial mess after another, his gambling debts, his big ideas that always crashed and burned, the mountain of credit card bills he swore he'd pay but never did. I was his personal bailout machine, always expected to step in, no thanks required. But this time? This time I didn't cave. When he called, same arrogant tone, same impatient attitude, I finally told him no. And get this, he actually laughed. He laughed like I'd just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Then, just like flipping a switch, his voice turned cold. Said I could either step up and help, or stay out of their lives completely. And all I said back was, then I'll stay out. I thought the guilt would hit me like a truck. But sitting there, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, all I felt was bone-deep exhaustion. And then, relief. A strange, quiet relief. For once, I wasn't carrying someone else's mess. I was free. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because 3 days later, everything flipped again. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting on a cup of that cheap instant coffee, the kind that tastes like burnt cardboard but gets the job done, when my phone rang. Unknown number. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But something in my gut said, pick up the call. Is this Daniel Carter? The voice was sharp, polite. Lawyer sounding. Yeah. Who's this? This is James Holloway, he said. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Richard Carter. Do you have a moment to talk about your uncle's will? I nearly dropped my mug right there on the linoleum. My uncle? I stood frozen, racking my brain for a Richard Carter. My dad's side of the family was full of folks I barely knew, most of them just names that came up during arguments. But then it hit me, Uncle Rick. I barely knew the guy. Dad always talked trash about him, said he was a loser, never did anything worthwhile. Honestly, I hadn't seen Uncle Rick since I was a teenager. The lawyer kept going. Richard Carter passed away 2 weeks ago. You've been named as the sole beneficiary of his estate. I'd like you to come by my office to discuss the details. I blinked, trying to process it. Sole beneficiary? You mean he left me something? Mr. Holloway didn't miss a beat. Not something, Mr. Carter. He left you everything. I dropped into a chair like the wind had been knocked out of me. My mind was spinning. This had to be some kind of mistake. I hadn't even talked to Uncle Rick in over 10 years. Why would he leave me anything? And what did everything even mean? I could barely wrap my head around it. Okay, I managed, still dazed. When do you need me to come in? As soon as possible, Holloway said. There are some urgent matters to discuss regarding your inheritance. That phrase, urgent matters, hit me like a cold gust of wind. It stirred something uneasy in my gut. I had no clue what I was walking into, but one thing was clear, the power dynamic in my life was shifting for the first time, and this time, it was tipping in my favor. I wasn't about to waste that. The drive to the lawyer's office was a blur. I don't even remember the turns or the traffic. My head was spinning with memories, trying to stitch together anything I could recall about Uncle Rick. Why me? Why now? All I'd ever heard growing up was how much of a deadbeat he was. My dad never missed a chance to tear him down. Rick's a bum, he'd say. Can't hold a job. Can't hold a thought. He talked about him like he was some stain on the family name. Truth be told, I'd only met the guy a handful of times, usually at awkward family barbecues or tense holiday dinners. He never made a scene, just lingered in the background, sipping whatever was in his glass, quietly watching while the rest of the family boasted and bragged. He never joined in. He never argued. And then, one day, he just disappeared. Nobody asked where he went. Nobody seemed to care. My father made it sound like he crawled under a rock and stayed there. And now here I was, 10 years later, being told that same man had left everything to me. I braced myself for some dingy office with yellowed blinds and filing cabinets stuffed to the brim. But when I stepped into the law firm, it felt like walking into another world. Glass walls, hardwood floors, leather chairs that probably cost more than my rent. The receptionist gave me the kind of fake smile folks save for people who clearly don't belong. "Mr. Carter?" I turned to see a middle-aged guy in a sharp suit walking toward me, a folder in one hand. "James Holloway," he said, offering a firm handshake. "Right this way." He led me down a pristine hallway and into a conference room that looked like it belonged in a movie. He motioned for me to sit and flipped open the folder. "I imagine you have some questions," he said. "That's an understatement," I muttered. "Your uncle, Richard Carter, was a very private man," he began. "But he made sure all his affairs were in order before he passed. You are the sole beneficiary of his estate. That includes his financial assets, properties, and business holdings." I blinked. "Business holdings?" I repeated. "How much are we talking?" Without a word, Holloway slid a single piece of paper across the table. I picked it up and glanced at the numbers. Then I read it again. And again. 7 figures. I sat back, stunned. This has to be a mistake. My dad always said he was broke. Your father, Holloway said, with a neutral tone that gave away nothing, was misinformed. Richard Carter was quite successful. He made intelligent investments, ran multiple businesses, and lived below his means. That's why no one ever knew how much he was worth. I gripped the paper tighter as the truth started sinking in. My father had spent his whole life hustling, begging, borrowing, and guilt-tripping me for money. He played the victim, always broke, always in need. And all that time, the man he ridiculed and ignored had quietly built a fortune. I almost laughed. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. "So what now?" I asked, my voice low, trying to stay grounded. Holloway leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Now you decide what to do with your inheritance. But I have a feeling," he added, "you already have a few ideas." And he was right. I'd spent years feeling powerless. Not anymore. I left that law office with a folder full of documents and a head full of possibilities. That number, 7 figures, flashed in my brain like it was written in neon. In the span of one meeting, I'd gone from struggling to pay rent to being a millionaire. But this wasn't just about wealth. It was about finally having control. My dad had used me like his personal piggy bank for years. Every time he gambled too much or racked up another pile of credit card debt, he'd come knocking, acting like I owed him. Not anymore. The moment I got home, I started digging. My dad's financial mess wasn't exactly a secret, it was practically a public service announcement. Loans, cards, shady IOUs, he owed money all over town. But one name stood out, a private lender. Some local guy who clearly wasn't operating under a bank's watchful eye. The interest alone could make a grown man cry. I had the money now. And I bought out that debt like it was pocket change. Which meant I now had the legal right to collect every last cent. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. A bit more digging led me to their house, the one they'd lived in forever. Turns out, it was on the edge of foreclosure. One more missed payment, and it was gone. So I made another move. Called the bank. Made an offer. Signed the paperwork. Just like that, I owned the rights. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my father. "Daniel, we need to talk." His voice was tight. Nervous. "About what?" I asked, pretending not to know a thing. "Cut the crap," he snapped. "I got a notice saying my debts were transferred to a new collector. They're demanding full payment. That wouldn't happen to be you, would it?" I smiled, slow and steady. "It is." Silence. For once, he didn't have a comeback. No guilt trip. No demands. Just dead air. "You told me to stay out," I said. "So I did. Now it's your turn. Pay up, Dad. You've got 7 days. Daniel, listen." I hung up. And that? That was just the beginning. He went quiet for 2 days after that. I pictured him pacing the floor, checking his accounts, calling old friends, trying to figure out a way out. But this time, the noose was in my hands. I'd taken over his debts. Now it was time to take the house. I held the foreclosure rights. All it took was one more push, a single final notice. I sent it out, certified mail. Immediate payment required. Let's see how he likes playing by my rules for a change. I knew damn well my father didn't have the money. He never had it. Man lived paycheck to paycheck his whole life, blowing what little he scraped together at the racetrack or some shady poker table, always chasing that one big score. But this time? There was no one left to pull him out of the hole he dug. Funny enough, the next call didn't even come from him, it came from my mom. "Daniel, please," she said the second I picked up. "Whatever you're doing, you have to stop." I almost laughed right there. Stop? They ever once stop when I was barely hanging on? When I was burning through my own savings to cover their messes, did they stop to think about how it was ruining me? Nah. They just kept taking. "I'm just doing what Dad always preached," I told her. "Handling my responsibilities." "You're ruining us," she cried. "This is our home." "And how many times did you shrug and say, 'Not your problem,' when he buried me in debt?" I asked. "You watched him drain me dry, and now suddenly it matters?" She didn't say a word after that. "You've got 3 days to leave the house," I said, my voice ice cold. "Think of it as me finally staying out of your life, just like you always wanted." I hung up before she could respond. 3 days later, I stood outside that house, the one they clung to for decades, as the eviction crew pulled up. My father came storming out the front door, face red, fists clenched, just boiling over. "You think this makes you a man?" he shouted. "Destroying your own family?" I didn't even blink. Just watched as the movers started taking out the furniture, piece by piece. "You told me to stay out," I said. "I'm just making sure you stay out too." He lunged at me, full of rage, but I didn't move. Not an inch. "Get out of my sight," I said. "And don't ever come looking for me again." Then I turned and walked away. First time in my life I did that without feeling an ounce of guilt. And just like that, my father was the one left standing there with nothing. I figured he'd blow up. Scream. Throw threats like confetti. But he didn't. He just stood there watching, arms limp at his sides, like the fight had drained out of him. My mother clung to him, crying, but he looked empty. Like a balloon someone forgot to tie. It was almost disappointing. "You always hated us," he muttered as I turned my back. I stopped, turned my head just enough to look at him, and said, "No. I just finally stopped loving people who never loved me back." Then I walked off for good. By the end of the day, the house was mine. Locks changed. Parents gone. For the first time ever, they had nowhere to go, and I wasn't the one stuck out in the cold. And you know what? I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. Because standing there in what used to be their living room, it hit me like a freight train. I'd spent my whole life trying to save them. But this? This was the first time I had saved myself. But I wasn't finished yet. Owning the house was just the start. I wanted to make sure my father never had a chance to claw his way back from this. So I dug deeper. Turned out the man had more debt hiding under the floorboards than a busted casino. Old business loans, tax bills, IOUs to buddies who'd long stopped expecting anything back. And with my new bank account? Picking up those debts was as easy as ordering takeout. One by one, I bought it all. By the time I was through, the man didn't just owe money, he owed me. And I sure as hell wasn't handing out second chances like the banks did. I sent the final notice myself. Pay up or file bankruptcy. I already knew what he'd do. Pride like his? He'd choke on the words before asking me for help. But bankruptcy? That was a whole different beast. The day that legal notice hit, it landed like a bomb. 2 days later, his name was on the public record, bankrupt. Financially ruined. A lifetime of arrogance, gone in a puff of smoke. Lost his house, his credit, his so-called reputation. And I made sure he knew who dropped the hammer. Sent him one text. "Now we're even." He didn't write back. Didn't have to. I knew he saw it. With that done, I turned my attention to the house. And I didn't want to just live in it, I wanted to wipe it clean. Every last trace of them? Gone. Old couch? Dumped. Family photos? In the trash. Anything that reminded me of the life they built off my back? Erase like it never existed. Once it looked brand new, fresh floors, new paint, not a single whisper of the past. I did one last thing, I sold it. Not 'cause I needed the money, but because I wanted it gone. Wanted to make damn sure my father could never set foot in it again. The day the deal closed, I got another call. My mother again. I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me. "Daniel," she said, voice soft. Softer than I'd ever heard. "We need to talk." "About what?" I said, leaning back in my chair, already knowing where this was headed. "Your father," she said after a pause. "He's not doing well. He's lost everything." "You've made your point." "Have I?" I asked. She didn't respond. "You were fine when I was drowning," I said, my voice level. "Fine watching him ruin me. But now that it's his turn? Now it's a problem?" "It's not the same," she whispered. "No," I said. "It's not. Because this time, it's his problem. Not mine." And just like that, she had nothing left to say. I hung up. And I never answered her calls again. Weeks passed. Peace settled in like warm sunlight through a window. No more guilt trips. No more emergency calls begging for cash. No more feeling like I was just a wallet with legs. They were sinking. And I was finally standing on solid ground. But it still wasn't over. One night, I got a message from an unknown number. Almost didn't open it. But something made me check. Just one line. "I need to see you. Please." I didn't even have to check the name. I already knew. It was my father. I almost deleted the message. Lord knows I wanted to. But something in me said no, I needed to see him. I needed to see what he'd become. So I sent one line back. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. diner on 5th. When I walked in, I barely recognized him. The man who used to strut around with his chest out like he owned the world? Gone. What sat there now was a shelled, clothes wrinkled, hair a mess, hands trembling around a chipped coffee cup. And when he looked up at me? For the first time in his life, my father looked small. "Daniel," he rasped. "What do you want?" I asked flatly, not even pretending to be warm. He took a shaky breath. I need help." I tilted my head, playing along. "Help? That's rich. Weren't you the one who told me to stay out of it if I wasn't gonna help?" His face twitched. "I didn't mean." "No," I cut in, "you meant every word. Don't backpedal now." He tried to hold onto his pride, jaw tight, eyes darting around like he was looking for a way out. But there wasn't one. I could see it. The man was drowning. "Look," he mumbled, "I screwed up. I know I did. But I'm still your father." That made me laugh. I mean, really laugh. "No, you're just the man who bled me dry every chance he got. And now that the tables have turned, now you remember your dad?" He didn't say a word. Just sat there, looking like he might fall apart any second. "Please, Daniel," he whispered. "I have nowhere to go." I leaned in, elbows on the table. "Neither did I. But you didn't give a damn then. So tell me, why should I now?" His eyes widened like he genuinely didn't see this coming. "Because I'm your family." I smirked. "And you told me to stay out of my family's business. So now?" I stood up, tossed a few bills on the table. "You stay out of mine." I walked out without looking back. Didn't need to. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. That once proud man who used to bark orders, demand money, treat me like a damn ATM, he was just a broken shell now, sitting in a cheap diner, begging for scraps. And I had no more sympathy left to give. That night I sat on my couch, phone in hand, just waiting. I knew another message would come. He always circled back, always tried again. But not this time. This time, I think even he knew there was no one left to run to. Not Mom. She was just as wrecked. Not my sister. She only knew how to take, not help. Now he was right where he'd left me so many times before rock bottom, with nobody coming to save him. When my phone buzzed, I braced myself for another plea. But it wasn't from him. It was James Holloway, my uncle's lawyer. Mr. Carter, I'd like to discuss one more matter regarding your uncle's estate. Please call me when you can. My stomach knotted up. What now? I thought everything was settled. I'd already inherited the money, used it to take back what my father stole, and cut the last cords tying me to that mess. But I called him anyway. Mr. Carter, Holloway said, your uncle had one final asset tucked away. Something overlooked. What kind of asset? Property, he said. Your father's old auto shop. I blinked. Wait, what? I thought he lost that years ago. He did. Your uncle bought it, quietly. Held on to it all this time. And now, it belongs to you. I sat there stunned, phone clutched in my hand. My father's auto shop, the one he'd poured his heart into before flushing it all down the drain, that place was mine now. I almost laughed out loud. In one last, unexpected twist, my uncle had given me the final nail in the coffin. I'd taken the house, the money, the pride, and now, the dream my father destroyed with his own hands? That was mine too. And I sure as hell wasn't giving it back. So, Holloway asked, would you like to set up a visit? I smiled. Absolutely. The next morning, I stood outside that rusted old shop, staring at the faded sign my dad used to brag about. Weeds growing through the pavement, paint flaking off the walls, it looked just like him, worn out, forgotten. I stepped inside. The place still smelled like oil and rust, still echoed with the past. This was once his kingdom. Now, it was just another piece of rubble I owned. And I already knew exactly what I was going to do. I made a call. Within a week, the shop was sold, not to him, not to someone who'd preserve it, but to a company that planned to tear it down and build something shiny and new. By the time my father caught wind of it, the deal was already signed. He called me, voice shaking with rage. You had no right, he screamed. I kept it simple. I had every right, I said. You made damn sure of that. And then I hung up.